Welcome back to MBS Fitness Radio, where we share stories of health and fitness success and valuable information to help you, our listeners, have success on your health and fitness journey. On this podcast, I'm joined by Angie Foree and Chris Hoppe, and we discuss all things injuries. Two biggest takeaways from this podcast are the importance of having the proper mindset around injuries and going ahead and establishing a plan of action to take prior to actually getting injured, knowing that at some point it's going to happen. So let's go ahead and put a plan in place and how we're going to handle that when it does. We lose Hoppe about 20 minutes into this podcast. He was having some internet issues, but Angie and I continue the conversation throughout the rest of the podcast. So without further ado, enjoy MBS Fitness Radio.
Get ready for a no BS approach to health and fitness. This is MBS Fitness Radio.
All right, what's up, guys? We're back on MBS Fitness Radio. I'm here with Angie Foree and Chris Hoppe. And our topic for today is injuries. And so, collectively, we've got several decades, not only in our own fitness, but and being in being guides and coaches in the industry as well. I think all of us have at least 2 decades, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we got at least collectively 60 plus years between all of us. And so the thing I was thinking about last night, and what I'd like to talk through, I'd like to kind of go through this in the time frame of like pre-injury, injury, post-injury. And I want to talk about kind of the mindset, the appropriate mindset necessary to have success through injury, what that appropriate mindset is prior to getting injured. I think there's oftentimes we'll hear from people with low experience, like, I don't want to get injured, which is understandable. Like, I don't want to get injured either. But like having been in this game for so long, growing up playing football, it's like you kind of just recognize like, well, at some point I'm going to get injured. And I think where sometimes people struggle, and there's this kind of chasm between people who have been doing it for a long time and people who are new to it. It's like our mindset seems a bit extreme when it comes to injury, and can actually kind of push people, cannot be helpful. And I'll give you an example. Like, Hoppe, we both played football, and like I'm sure you always heard like the terminology, like, are you injured or are you hurt? And it was kind of this there's kind of this expectation that like at some point, if you were hitting each other over thousands and thousands of plays, at some point your body's going to suffer some ill effects of that, right? And there's an expectation, and
you're gonna get dinged up.
Yeah, there's an expectation, and there's like there's like virtue and value in like playing through being hurt. And so like an example would be like, if your finger was broken in the middle of a football game, there would be an expectation that you would continue to play that football game. You'd be like, hey, we're going to tape that finger up and you're going to go back to play, right? An ACL tear or something like that, that would be an injury that would take you out. And so with that kind of in mind, like, that was what I kind of grew up with. And then going through powerlifting and just seeing people like have injuries, or even in CrossFit, tearing calluses. What I see is like kind of this mindset of like, oh, at some point this is going to happen. And the appropriate way to handle it is to expect it to happen and already have a strategy in place for how you're going to handle it when it does happen. I would like to hear kind of what your advice would be to people who haven't grown up or come through that, to that background. What would you say to someone about how to set their mindset appropriately prior to injury?
You go on, Hoppe.
I'll let Hoppe start.
Okay. All right. I was going to say, all right. I would say the way I try to think about it for any of my athletes or anybody I'm working with who doesn't have any previous experience with anything like this is that if you continue to do what you're doing, you're still going to get injured. You're like, it's just going to be long and slow. The chances of you not working out and getting injured are just as great as you working out and getting injured. If you sit on the couch, the chances of you developing heart disease, the chance of you developing joint and back problems, the chance of the lack of movement, just as much, if not, from my experience, 10 times more than not moving. So the risk of moving and getting injured is well worth it. In fact, lower than it is if I don't move. So does that make sense? Is that tracking?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, in that same mindset, to me, like when I encounter people who have no real background of anything and they are scared, it's usually because someone has told them, well, if you do that, you're going to get injured, you're going to get hurt. So they're not surrounded by people who have any type of fitness or healthy lifestyle where they've lived and breathed through injuries. And so that's the first thing, is like, well, likely you might, but it's our job to kind of help prevent that by giving you the proper guidance through training. But I think that they've already come into a meeting with the potential injury, like it just resonates so strongly with inside of their ears. And it's just really coming from a place that has no basis. It's just false information, that's been put out into them. And so I think and that has to be changed gradually.
Yeah. So I guess that's like, it's learning to develop like a healthy viewpoint of your body. So like Hoppe was saying, is like, hey, you're gonna get hurt whether you train or not. It's just whether you're gonna get it's just whether those are gonna be like exercise related bumps and bruises that we occur on the way, or they're gonna be the ill impacts of living an unhealthy life. Like either way, this is in your future. So let's choose things that are going to they're going to help us build our health and fitness. And you're saying like so many people hear negative messaging and kind of self-identify with like a fragile body.
Right.
And so they have this identity of fragility and this fear that like, I'm going to go into this, I'm going to get hurt, versus a resilient message. It's like, hey, no, your body's resilient. It's powerful. It can heal itself. And so I think, a lot of that just comes down to being around like the right community, the right culture, like what that messaging is, and how you kind of identify yourself.
Right. Yeah. I like to try to get people to change their mindset. It has to become gradual. Like, let's just say they've never done anything in their life athletically. So they will not ever see themselves as an athlete. Well, that's what I like to really see our CrossFitters as an athlete. Okay. You are becoming, no matter what part of the journey you're on. I mean, you're going to gradually become a better and better athlete. But what do we know about all athletes? I mean, the biggest thing we know about all athletes is we're going to encounter an injury at some point. And so we reframe how they actually even view themselves, then that can help them understand, like, okay, having an injury might come along with this, with this training, because I'm an athlete and this does happen periodically.
Well, it's the nature that like in order to make progress, you have to induce stress and stimulus upon your body. In other words, like you have to kind of stress yourself in a way that's going to actually cause adaptation. And there's a way to do that very intelligently and reduce risk of injury. But the necessary training that's required to get better is in itself going to lend itself, or it is in itself going to have a risk of injury.
Right.
And so when we just kind of extrapolate that risk out over the necessary time frame of decades, at some point you're going to have something happen to you.
Yep.
It's not that like every week we should be popping.
No.
I mean, like you should. Yeah. It's just like occasionally you're going to have something pop up. And I think like one way we could kind of categorize like injuries or being hurt or whatever is like, there's certain, you can think of it like there's something that's going to happen to me in a workout that I'm going to be able to continue to work out but it's going to be uncomfortable. So that
Right.
would be like a callus tear.
Yep.
Like a callus tear in the middle of workout, it's like, crap, this sucks, but I can continue to work out.
Yeah.
Then there'd be like a injury that'd be like, I can continue to do like that workout. Then there'd be an injury, be like, this is going to end my workout. And now, but I can still train. I'm just going to have to kind of adjust my training accordingly.
Yeah.
So this would be like some type of muscle pull, some type of joint issue, joint pain. This would be some type of like potential like broken bone.
Yeah.
Those are like and then how we would deal with that's gonna be a little bit differently than how we deal with the injury that just like makes our workout uncomfortable. And then there's like a major injury that really impacts like how we live life. This would be a car wreck with like multiple broken bones. This would be like having to go through like joint replacement, something like that.
Yeah.
So you can kind of like categorize those injuries and like in those ways, and that can kind of probably help you have a better approach. So like, well, how am I going to address one of these as they occur? Hoppe, kind of what's your framework for like looking at injuries and like how you deal with different kinds of injuries? Because like what we just discussed was you can kind of categorize injuries and like there's boo-boos that like affect that would happen in that training session that would make that training session like uncomfortable, but I could continue the training session, like a torn callus. Then there's something that would happen that would like prevent me from continuing to train in that session and would cause me to kind of like have to adapt my training, a pulled muscle, a broken bone, something like that. And then there's like major catastrophic injuries that are going to like impact my life and will require like some serious PT, like a major car wreck, something like that. So like, how do you, what's your kind of framework for thinking through injuries and like how to maybe overcome each one of those?
I think for me, whenever I get an injury of any kind, whether it's a major injury or something, relatively small for me, which would be tearing a callus or straining a muscle or things like that, which are, I would say relatively common, depending on the intensity that I train. And it's kind of going back to my goals. I always drop back to my goals. Like, what am I training for? Okay. And then how do I adjust what I'm doing to now I have to circumnavigate that obstacle is really all I have to figure out how to do. It's just an obstacle in the way. It's another training stimulus. So I try to view it as a stimulus, an opportunity to move around something. There was obviously a weak point in my body and that's my body letting me know, especially if it happens during training, that, man, need to adjust something to accommodate for just completely walk things away. So for me, when it happens in training, some of the lower grade.
So we're having some issues with hops. Angie, why don't you talk to me through like how you would guide someone through that?
Is he coming back on?
Hoppy, you're frozen for us, buddy. Angie, talk to us how you deal with that.
I like the way Hoppy started that. I mean, it does go back to your whys, like, why am I doing this in the first place? And I can take my own life as an example because I've had to, like last October, so a year ago, I had to take a step back from training because I needed to address this back issue I'd been having for a year. And so I took a step out of training, but I went to physical therapy.
Yeah.
Solely PT. And so when you're talking with a client or you've got a client or a member that has the higher level, maybe not to the car wreck catastrophe, but definitely to something that's going to impact what they can do on a day-to-day basis, which is what my issue was, then maybe we take that step back and we do physical therapy.
Yeah.
Maybe we go into or private training sessions, so that we can like allow the body to heal itself. But at the same time, we still have to move the body.
Yeah.
So for me, I went all the way back to PT only, but I still needed to come to my class times.
Yeah.
I did not want to remove myself from my peers. And I think that's an important, it's actually a very important healing process, is to keep people with their peers.
Yeah.
If you somebody isolates and goes back into their home and they're not around the positivity of training. Yeah, it's a bummer. I mean, it's been a bummer for a whole year to not be able to do the things I know I should be able to do. But what's a bigger bummer is like sitting at home, sulking about it. And then my whole body starts to decline.
Yeah.
And so that's the big thing we want people to understand too, is like socially, you need this. You need to be around the people that understand injury and that are going to support you through it.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is, why let the whole body suffer?
Yeah.
Like I could do certain things, very limited once because I'm almost 3 months out of back surgery. So, this has been a very long, slow process, and it'll continue to be a long, slow process. But I'm still in the class every day. I'm still going to do the best I can. And I want our clients to all do that. But I think we tend to get in our own way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what you hit on there is pretty important, is that like what we're dealing with is not just the physical recovery that has to occur from injury, but it's like that mental, emotional, social recovery that has to happen as well. And I mean, so much that comes like injuries will create fear within your body, distrust within your body. And so a lot of times what will allow that to do to us is then we make fear-based decisions.
Right.
Of course, we don't want to get hurt again. So then we start kind of just chopping away things that are kind of really essential to our overall health and fitness. And so what we do is we say, like, I just have to take off completely. And we don't realize that, like, you may have this one part of your body that's hurt, but the rest of your body is functioning fine. And that if we allow our overall fitness to decrease due to injury, not only are we going to have a harder time recovering, because the fitness level of your body is going to impact how well you recover, but we're actually having an even more difficult time coming back and getting back to the state we were
right
prior to that injury. Then when we do that, we also impact like our emotions. We don't recognize, or we know that the physical fitness impacts the way our brain works and breaks our brain chemicals, so that when we stop exercising, we actually are now putting ourselves in a more of a negative state. So we've had this injury that put us in a negative mindset. They put us in a fear-based mindset. We stop exercising, that actually makes our brain function worse. We increase our risk of depression. And then when we remove ourselves from our social network and our healthy social network, again, for most people, the relationship you have with other healthy people exists through the gym. It's not at work or at home or any of that kind of stuff. And so you remove yourself from that. Now you've got a social injury. So when we have an inappropriate approach to physical injury, we actually end up inducing emotional injury, mental injury, and social injury. And coming back from all of those is very difficult. And this is something I said to Keiki yesterday, is that what I think, what I see and what I want to caution people against is what they typically do is like, I just need to take some time off. And it's fear-based. It's like, I pulled my muscle, I broke my leg, like this thing happened. And sometimes it's not even it's not even like training related. Like you did it at work, or you did it at home, right? But there's this mindset of like, I need to take time off. And as difficult as it is to just get over the hump and just to do all the things necessary to take care of your body, you are making that so much more difficult when you remove all those healthy habits.
Yeah, let's think about what's tied to those healthy habits. So definitely the mental space, that's huge, right? So, but what about eating?
Yeah.
If you're not coming to the gym, for most people, then, they'll do their, they'll they'll approach nutrition much better if they're training. But take the training component out, and then the nutrition component starts to deteriorate. So now we've got this, it's a huge, drop off of the training. So your physical body is suffering, your mental, your state, your emotional state, depression is slipping in. And now we're feeding that depression through food.
Yeah.
That's not appropriate for your body.
Yeah.
So it happens so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we think of like what's the hurdle to get back to our original state? So we've been making great progress. We've been in the gym regularly, and then we get hurt. The hurdle that we have to overcome is that injury.
Mm-hmm.
Not a very big hurdle to overcome.
Right.
But when we start building, adding bricks to that hurdle
Mm-hmm.
through letting our physical state decline, through not training, through poor nutrition, letting our emotional state, our mental state, our social state decline, now we do have a big, giant hurdle, and it's even more difficult to overcome.
Well, that hurdle just became a big mountain.
Right. And so, yeah. And so, like, I think what people tend to think is they're like, I'm just going to take, let me just take 6 weeks off. Let me just take the time off. And I was like, hey, let me just lay out a reality for you here, is that if we just look across the statistics of this nation, and I'm going to tell you the statistics of what I generally see working with people every day, is I'm going to take 6 weeks off. There's a much higher likelihood that you're going to take off forever and never come back.
Mm-hmm. We've seen that happen. We've seen that happen a lot.
Yeah.
It's
just like, occasionally people do. They almost never come back after 6 weeks. And the reason for that is this, is like, the type of person who has the mental strength and resiliency and everything necessary to come back after 6 weeks would never have taken off those 6 weeks in the first place. Yeah. That is a reality. If you had the mental fortitude, that the things necessary to be able to come back after those 6 weeks, you wouldn't take the 6 weeks off. You would go, my body's broken, but hey, I was resilient. It's going to fix itself. I'm going to focus on what I need to. I need to be in class, or I need to be here. I need to be around the positive people. I need to focus on the things that I can do, and not be focused on this singular tiny injury. I'll heal it up while making progress here.
I think it's important for how we identify ourselves through an injury too. So what I know from training so long with other people is, like, as soon as you start to identify yourself as the injured person, then that all starts to fall down. So for me, I'm not injured, right? I'm Angie with a back injury,
right?
Or Angie with back surgery. So we want to make sure people recognize themselves as a whole person first. Like, you're not, we don't want people to identify themselves through their injury.
Yeah.
Once that happens, then that negative mindset starts to take hold. So then it's those automatic negative thoughts. Well, I'm hurt. I can't do this.
Yeah.
It's just, and it happens without people even realizing it.
Yeah.
So I say we, help teach people how to separate themselves. Like, no, you're still a whole person.
Yeah.
You've got this one thing going on.
Yeah. I think that's powerful. It's like, maybe that's one of the other key ingredients to a proper mindset prior to getting injured, is like, how do you identify yourself? Are you like, I identify myself as the person who comes and exercises and does this and takes care of my body and stewards my body properly. And injury doesn't change who I am as a person, right? It may change my approach, or it may change my training style a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's not changing who I am and how I identify. But if we're coming into it, we already identify as a broken person. And that, I don't even mean like broken injury wise. It's like, if we kind of self-identify as like someone who struggles, someone who isn't motivated, someone who starts and stops, whatever it would be, then this is just, then an injury then like just allows us to easily shift away. Like, we're already struggling to like self-identify as like the healthy, fit person. So the injury just shifts our identity into like, no, I have a back injury. And like, how many times have you heard people like say something along the lines of like, you keep doing that, you're going to hurt your back. You keep doing that, you're going to have bad knees, or I can't do that, I've got bad knees. it's just like their identity is wrapped up in a broken, fragile body.
Right.
And then it's almost like you can't have it's difficult to have a conversation with someone like that because they can't break away from that identity of having a fragile body, and you can't break away from your identity of having a resilient, capable body.
Yeah. Well, I think some of that too, both sides gets fed, from our medical professions.
Yeah.
And so if we can help someone come in, let us help you. I mean, we have to stay within our scope. I'm not suggesting that we're not, but if you seek a medical professional who trains, you are likely to get the better advice on being able to continue to train and work around that. I think all too often we take all medical advice as, as truth, always truth. And we don't take the time to really maybe even interview our physicians. And that's exactly what I did with my surgeon. And he was probably taken aback by my questions, but it was important for me to say, okay, this is who I am. This is what I do. Right now, I cannot perform certain activities with my granddaughter, like walking with her. And that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
But you also need to know I plan to get back to doing everything in the gym that supports those activities with my grandchildren. And then I was like, and if you don't support what I do, that's okay. We're just not a good fit.
What questions did you ask him?
So that's exactly, I said, look, I'm a long-time CrossFitter. I'm a trainer. I work in a gym. I believe in weightlifting for optimal health. I believe the body is built to move, and I'm going to squat. I'm going to deadlift. I believe it's great for optimal performance.
Yeah.
And I said, if you align with that, then we'll be a good fit.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I said, exercise and training is important for my body, and I believe it is for all bodies.
Yeah.
And he said, because I just paused and I was like, if you believe in that, or you believe you can help me get back to my level of performance so that I can live my life properly, then we'll be okay. And he said, I just really wish other people felt the same.
That's awesome.
And so, and then we were just great the whole time. And then every check-in, because this was major back surgery, right? Like this took me out. But at 2 weeks, he was like, I don't see many people walk in here the way you walked in here at 2 weeks. So my body was built and was resilient. And it's from the years and years and years of training, decades of training prior to. And he was like, I knew we weren't going to have any trouble with your surgery, and I knew you weren't going to have any trouble recovering from your surgery. So every check-in, it's been great. And every check-in, I'm like, can I add this? And I am very specific, because I can't tell you, and you know this too, like how many people that will present with a knee injury. They go to someone and they say, well, you shouldn't squat.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you please explain to me how I'm going to get myself on the toilet and then off the toilet?
If I go on the ground, how am I supposed to get back up?
What do I do? And I don't think we take the time to really question medical professionals. And it's not to feel like we know more. It's just like, I need you to help me understand how I can make my body optimal.
Well, I think what people need to kind of understand is that doctors are typically trained, especially when it comes to orthopedic injuries, they are trained to relieve symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they are trained to relieve that pain, relieve that dysfunction, fix that thing that's broken or torn. They're not necessarily, there are some that are trained in this way, but majority wise, it's not about addressing the original cause. It's about, and then part of the reason for this, you have to understand, is like the amount of people who exercise regularly and are fit is such a small percentage of the population that their experience and their training is geared towards the 90%.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been in an orthopedic office and you look around, it's not a bunch of athletes in there. It's a bunch of overweight, unhealthy, and typically elderly people who are dealing with the degradation of an ill-kept body. And so they're not that's their experience, that's their education, and that's typically how they're going to approach their communication and their strategy with you. So to take that into consideration is you just need to know kind of what you're walking into and take their advice and put it into the advice of other professionals who are part of that team.
Right.
Ideally, and like the beauty now is that there are doctors that are used to working with athletes, and they can and if you go in and from the get-go identify, as I was like, I've had clients in the past, I was like, hey, look, if you don't go in there and tell them that you're an athlete, they're going to assume that you're not. And I can tell you right from the get-go that I've literally seen someone who looks like an athlete and goes in there and says the right stuff be treated completely different than someone who doesn't look like an athlete and says the wrong stuff with the exact same injury.
Right.
So
yeah,
you have to go in there and kind of like let them know, like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do, and then you'll typically get a slightly different approach about how they're going to help you along your
I did
path.
experience that because I had to spend one night in the hospital just for observations, and they sent someone from physical therapy in the next day to kind of make sure I could get out of bed, move, up, down.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, wait, you've done this before. And I'm like, well, it's just moving my body, like it wasn't, but for him, he's not accustomed to seeing, he's accustomed to like being more hands-on with the patient and like, okay, we're going to pull your legs over. We're going to get here. I'm going to help you up. And I was like, I'm just going to need you to back up a little bit and let me just self-support, and then I can stand. And so you're right. I mean, like it's just not the majority of the population or people that know their bodies and know what they're doing. And so you're going to draw,
I think that's a good testament to the importance of having a good base of fitness. Is like your ability to recover from an injury is going to be drastically impacted by your current level of fitness. So you're going to come back quicker the more fit you are. So knowing that, like, that's why it's important to build fitness, because in case something happens, you've got the resiliency to overcome it better. But then also when it does happen, maintain the fitness that helps you get there in the first place. Like, don't sacrifice your overall fitness for fear that you might get hurt again.
Yeah. And I did not talk openly about my impending surgery because, to like people outside of the gym, because the last thing that you want to hear, because, it's not true, it's just another lie that's told, is like, oh, well, that's what happens when you lift weight, or that's what happens. And I was like, I'm not doing this, because that's false. There's nothing that I did that created the issue that I had. And so there's nothing that it was just going to happen. It was an injury that, I mean, it could have been a birth defect, and so, and then just over time usage, just creates, an issue. And so we got it fixed, and now we're good. And so, or we will be 2 more weeks, and then I can go back to lifting. But that's a 3-month, 3 months outside of my surgery. I can't imagine, like, someone who doesn't have a healthy, fit body, what that recovery time is going to be. It's going to be extensive. Extensive. It was hard on me, and I'm fit, and so I know it's very extensive for people who don't have this fit body. But the body is created to be fit. The body is created to move. It's created to be resilient. So we've got to help people understand that. And like the first thing is like not identifying as it.
Yeah, I think I mean the biggest takeaway I think from that people should hear from this podcast is how important it is to set the right mentality for yourself and how you view your body and to and how that's going to impact your experience should you have an injury. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we talked about this yesterday a little bit about like we our expectations versus realities can really impact like our emotional state. And so example being I can't remember the book I was reading, but we tend to kind of think that like, oh, we must be so much happier than people back in the day they were. And the reality is like, well, if back in the day, like let's say with the HVAC, back in the day, prior to having HVAC, you were just used to having experienced these temperatures. So when you got in the shade, when it was hot outside, or when you got along a fire when it was cold, that made you feel good. You know, you were like, this is satisfying. I feel good to this.
Yeah.
But that satisfaction is the same satisfaction that you get when you walk into the HVAC. So it's not that using that example, if we have this kind of expectation and we having been along this journey for so long, once you've had a couple of injuries, you kind of know like, okay, that, that sucked, but that's not that big a deal. Like I've strained many muscles over the last 30 years. Right. And some of it have been major ones and some have been minor ones, but like usually when it happens, I'm like, crap. Okay. Well, but because I've experienced that before, I don't have that. There's not like a real emotional, oh my gosh, what happened to my body there? But if you've never experienced a muscle pull, it can seem like a catastrophic, like, end of life kind of scenario. Like, oh my gosh, I've never experienced this before. Like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, and so, I think that's where it's important to lean into those people who have experience. That's why it's important to be part of a community and lean into your guide, because if otherwise you're using your own, if you're letting your own emotions guide you through an experience that you've never had before, the chances that you make good decisions along that way is quite low. Or if you're letting the emotions of other people,
right,
and like your parents or your family or your friends or someone who is not they themselves an experienced person in the health and fitness industry, or they themselves are healthy and fit and have been doing it for decades, they're going to give you bad advice because they do not have a correct understanding, and then they're relying on their emotions to help guide you through this. And the problem with that is like your emotions and their emotions align.
right.
They're going to tell you what you're feeling, and you're going to use that to as justification, like, yes, that's what I should do. The reality is, it's like, that's not what you should do.
Right. Well, and we talk about friction points often. And so we have a new client that's coming in, and they're already experiencing a lot of friction, right? So they're unhealthy. They know what that feels like. They don't know what training feels like. So we've introduced this new stimulus, and that's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
That's a friction that we've got to kind of work through. So then, fast forward a few months, we get this like minor injury, and then that adds another friction point.
Right.
And so what happens is that just those things just continue to build, and then that becomes the story that they tell themselves. Well, and then their friends who say, I told you were going to get hurt if you did that.
Yeah.
That endorses that negativity. And then we just watch them walk away.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, these things are, we can work through this stuff. We can really work through this stuff. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So it is a challenge. Yeah.
I'll tell a story. One of my injuries, this would probably be my most impactful injury. And like maybe use that as a bit of an example of like how to appropriately approach injuries. So literally woke up one day and my elbow had like 15 degrees of movement in it. I didn't remember doing anything. There wasn't like a snap, a pop, or anything that like made it feel bad. I just woke up. I was like, oh, well, that's weird. I couldn't flex or extend my elbow. And kind of I said, well, let's just see kind of like if this gets any better.
Yeah.
and it didn't. So I gave it like a week and it never got any better. And I was like, well, let me go to a PT. So I went to multiple PTs and both of them gave me strategies and some routines to try. So for 2 weeks. So like 1 week trying himself, 2 weeks with one PT, 2 weeks with another PT, still nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Go to a orthopedic, get it x-rayed. Looks like it's fine. Sends me to PT again, another 2 weeks. And then finally it's like, okay, now I'm whatever this is, 7 weeks in. And they finally have an MRI and they go, oh, it turns out you have a piece of cartilage that's just stuck in your elbow. Mm-hmm. So the only way we can fix this is to scope it and take this cartilage out. There's no actual damage to like any tissue. There's why I didn't feel like a bull, but somewhere in there. And I was like, how the cartilage come loose? Is like, who knows?
How does that even happen?
He was like, you got it. You got years of football. You got years of training. And at some point, like it might have just broken off and fell in there. So had to go get it scoped. And then it was, I think about 2 weeks of like couldn't use it just to like have everything heal up, and then maybe it was like 2 weeks kind of building back slowly. So it was like this total time of basically like 3 months with not able to use my arm. And so you can imagine what would happen if I had just been like, oh crap, well, my arm's hurt, I can't exercise, and I had taken off for 3 months. Like everything would have gotten bad. I would have lost strength throughout my entire body. I would have lost a ton of my endurance and I would probably put on body fat. That would make me feel bad about myself. I wouldn't have be able to engage with the people I love to engage with on every day. So literally I woke up on Saturday. That's when it felt bad. Or maybe it's Sunday. I can't remember. It was like the weekend. Monday I trained. Tuesday I trained. Wednesday I trained, and I trained every single day, every single one of those weeks, and never took a day off. And I just went to class and modified whatever I could do. So there was times where I was like, well, I can't do pull-ups and I'm tired. So I did ring rows, right? Like I'm tired of doing ring rows. I'm going to do banded one-arm pull-ups. Or today we've got bench press and I can't bench press, so I'm gonna do a single arm bench press. It was just like every day figuring out how am I going to still train, still get the stimulus a day, but I could because the rest of my body was fine.
Right. So you could squat.
I could squat.
Yeah.
I could deadlift. Or actually, I could
You could deadlift, but you could do. You could do kettlebell.
Yeah, I would do a single. I would just I would get the stimulus, or I maybe do a good morning. I would find a way to get a stimulus. And what I learned along that was like, oh, there's a million ways that I can get the same stimulus, still make good progress. And so here's the deal: is like over those 6 weeks, I got more fit. I was injured and I got more fit. Yeah. And not only that, because I was training my opposite arm, and this is something that people need to understand is if you have an injury to one side and you train the opposing side, you're actually going to get stimulus, cross-sectional stimulus to that injured side. So your muscle loss, your strength loss is going to be far less if by training the still healthy side. And so to me, one of my mindsets when I have an injury is like, I really focus on ensuring that I immediately get back to the gym, that I immediately get back in there and focus on teaching myself I can do this. And one of the things that we kind of like to share with people is when we look at these adaptive athletes, like there are people without any arms, or any legs. So if they're still able to train without a leg, then surely you can train with an injured leg, right? If they can train if they're able to train consistently with one arm, you can train with one good arm and one injured arm, right?
One of the things I used to say to people over the years, like, if they, had an injury, like, well, what would you do if you didn't have that hand? What if it was just missing? Would you just never train again? Would you never do anything? And that always gives people a little pause for thought, but it wasn't until I guess sometime earlier this year, when I met my current client who has multiple impairments, and I had to share with you. So this particular person has she's double amputee from the knees down, both knees. She has one full hand amputated, and then she has multiple fingers. So we have like literally 0 points of contact, right?
Yeah.
So, and she trains.
All right. Yeah.
She trains.
Right.
So I now, like, anytime somebody tells me they got a boo-boo, I'm like, but you have your legs, right? They're intact.
You broke your leg. That sucks. She doesn't have a leg.
She doesn't have, she also doesn't have 2 legs.
Yeah,
So,
she doesn't have any legs.
She's missing both legs, like literally. And so, but again, that goes back to like identifying ourselves as injured and not, and like my client, she doesn't really identify herself as, this extensively impaired person. And so when I met her and I told her, I was like, full disclosure, I am happy to train you, but I don't know how.
Yeah.
So I'm going to learn.
Yeah.
All right. And so I went on this quest to learn. But and on that quest, like the one question that one should always pose to someone who has an injury is like, okay, well, what can you do?
Yeah.
Because now they've like identified themselves as a person that can't do things because I've got this injury. I can't do. What can you do?
Yeah.
And so maybe they haven't even thought about what they can do, but by starting the conversation with like, tell me what you can do, then they realize, oh, I'm not bound by this one thing.
Yeah.
There are like multiple things I can do. Well, I can do a one-arm, kettlebell, row, or I can do a single leg squat to a box, whatever the case may be. There's always some things we can do.
Yeah.
Even with a full spinal injury where I could not load my spine.
Yeah.
What could I do? I did everything I could do.
Yeah, there's something you can do. Let's focus on that.
Always.
Yeah, I think that's like having that mindset of like my body's resilient. I identify as the person who's going to exercise, going to take care of my body, regardless of the situation I'm put in. And knowing that it's going to happen at some point. Right now, I'm going ahead and deciding that I'm going to focus on what I can do, not what I can't do.
Yeah. And I think that allows us to stay focused on like the original reason we train, right? Yeah. Like what's our why?
Yeah.
For me, like, why did I want to continue to do everything I could? I asked my surgeon every single step of the way, what can I do? What can I do? And it's because I needed to stay focused on my original why, which is like, I want to be able to play with my grandkids. Yeah. I want to be able to get back in the gym and not have lost so much strength. So what can I do where I'm not loading my spine and endangering, the work we've done on my back? And so I think if we can try to help people bring focus back to like their original why, like you're here because you don't feel well and you want to feel better. We can help you still feel better even while you're dealing with this injury.
Now, Javi had a good analogy, so I'm going to steal since he's not here, but he talked about like, if you were driving your car and you had a flat tire, you wouldn't take that car and just leave it there and go, oh, the tire's flat. Like
Car's done.
The car's done. We're just going to leave this thing, because what would happen? It would rust. It would fall apart. And when you needed to use that car in the future, it would not be able to function.
Mm-hmm. So then what do you have to do? You have to lean on other people to drive you.
Yeah. You'd be like, hey, right? I need you to take me here because I can't take myself there. And that's what happens to people who identify as fragile. Mm-hmm. Like they identify as the broken human and don't take responsibility for the solutions to the problems. So the appropriate thing to do is, okay, we're going to fix this tire so that we can keep driving the car.
Right.
You know what I mean? So if we have an injury, the purpose of your body is still like the purpose of the car still exists.
Right.
The purpose of your body is to move and to work and to be fit and to push, it was designed to have the capacities of strength, power, speed, mobility, flexibility, endurance, coordination. It was designed to have all that stuff. And so if you are injured and you stop, if you're injured and you stop recognizing like the design that your body has, and you just put that put it in the garage,
Mm-hmm.
not only do you now have a tire that's flat, but the rest of that car, the rest of your body has even more issues that you had to deal with. And
Yeah,
if
you
you
got a
ever,
rusted bucket now.
yeah, if you wanted to try to get it back running again, you don't just now have to fix the tire, you got to fix everything freaking else as well.
Yep. Yeah. I think the same on the opposite side. So we've also seen athletes who are unwilling to come into the gym because they want to be a full whole person.
Yeah.
Right. So they want to be able to operate at 100%. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, that's a good
that
one.
group of individuals. And so we've seen this, like, I've broken something, or I've injured something. I can't come back. And that's usually the ego that kind of tells them, like, if I can't come in and do level brown, like, or level black, like I normally do, then I'm just going to hang out until I can, repair or recover from this injury. Then I can go back and be back at my 100%. So what would you say to that?
Again, I'll go back to, hey, like, we have to address this ego issue at some point. And so we can either go ahead and address this ego, get it checked a little bit, come in, do some scaled down workouts, not be at the top of the leaderboard, and then come back better from this injury, having maintained fitness, dealt with the injury, rehabbed it, so on and so forth, and then come back and get back to banging. But if you stay out of the gym, not only are you going to have to deal with the injury rehab, you're not coming back in the gym at the level you used to be at. You're now coming back in at a level far lower than you were. And so now you're going to have an even greater ego check. You know what I mean? Because at least prior to that, you could at least lean on the fact that, like, I'm not able to output like I used to because I'm injured.
Right.
When you come back in, you're going to have to be like, I can't output like I used to because I was a wimp for the last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And I took 6 weeks off and didn't exercise.
Yeah.
And again, I guess that goes back to, like, it's your why, and it's like how your mindset and how you view yourself as I view myself as the person who, like, I view myself as the person who's going to train every day, period.
Yeah. Now,
having been that person, I've developed a pretty high level of output that allows me to be pretty competitive and output at a high level. But my identity and my why is not wrapped up in my ultimate competitive abilities. It's wrapped up in my actions of coming into the gym and stewarding my body well. So you have to put the ego aside.
On both ends.
Yep.
Yeah. Whether you're newer and whether you're seasoned, that's definitely something, like, even, like, because again, I've got 2 more weeks and then I get to come back, and, there's nothing that I'm going to have to, like, modify other than modifying based on the strength that I've not been able to attain, over the last, year that I've lost or whatever. So I have no limitations. Imagine what that looks like if I have not done anything since the beginning of this issue, which was, like, really most profound 1 year ago, 1 year and 2 months ago. 1 year and 2 months of waiting. So, right now I can come back and I'm not going to be where I left off. Maybe it's going to take a year, to get there. But if I took off a year, how many years do you think it's going to take me to get back?
A lot.
Yeah.
Well, I think what one thing that we can kind of extrapolate from that is that when we're talking about modifying, there's modifying movements and there's modifying load, and, like, knowing how to adjust those appropriately. Because the other thing about that athlete that wants to output a high level and doesn't want to come back at the gym until the fully healed, is like, when you come back, you're going to get injured again, like, guaranteed.
Oh yeah.
Because, like, if you're used to doing brown workouts and you take 6 weeks off and you come back in and go, like, well, I'm still brown, you're going to get hurt because you're not brown anymore. You're going to hurt yourself. So then, like, not only are you setting yourself up for like in the short term, but like you're setting yourself up or for failure in the short term, you're also setting yourself up for probably another injury. So we need to know how to properly modify.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're modifying workouts, we can look at what the purpose of that workout is, and kind of identify it between what are the movements that we're trying to train here, and then what are the capacities that we're trying to train here. So a movement may be like squatting, hinging, pushing, running, something like that. And then a capacity would be like strength, power, endurance. You know, if we have a particular injury that limits our movement, then without pain, then we just need to kind of probably scale or adjust the movement, but maintain the capacity. So an example would be is if we have a let's say our knee is bothering us, and then we come in and today is a moderately heavy squat, and we know that squatting is going to irritate our knee because we're trying to kind of rehab it, but we still want to develop the capacity for strength. Well, we could do a deadlift, right? We're still getting a full body movement, so we just adjust the movement, right? But we can still train the capacity, right? Now there may be something where it's like, okay, I've got a back injury. Squats is out, deadlifts is out. Is there an opportunity to do some type of strength-based work without irritating the back? Well, could we potentially do floor press that's not going to strain the back? And the answer is yes. It's like, okay, we can just shift it. We're still getting a strength-based movement. We're training the capacity, but the movement's a bit outside of the original, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Or we might say, you know what? I can't train this capacity, but I can train the movement. So I've overcome that knee injury, but like I probably shouldn't do a heavy squat today, but I like to reintroduce squats. So now we can maintain that movement and then just adjust the capacity appropriately. So instead of doing a moderately heavy set of 5, maybe we're going to do a light set of 5 using some of the tempo work and really focusing on the technique.
Or even like box or something like that.
Box squats,
if we, just to build, because one thing that does happen when one is coming back from injury is like your fear of re-injury.
Right.
And I know this in my own training, like I know that I'm going to be a little afraid for a while. And so addressing those issues on the front end before I even, get there is going to be important. And so same for other people, like now we have to rebuild your confidence. And so even like, okay, we can go a little bit heavier today, but maybe we don't need to go, below parallel. Let's just do some box squats, but we'll add a little bit more weight. And so, because again, it's just that fear that exists can set us up for an additional injury if we're not careful. And so addressing those things is helpful too.
Knowing how to navigate training with an injury and post-injury is important. And now here's something to consider is that this is probably not something you should make your own decisions on. Understand this. Like I just said earlier, when I first started this podcast, between the three of us, we have over 60 years of training experience. Think of the thousands of people that we have guided, the thousands of exercises that we've been exposed to. Every single day, we are problem solving these types of situations. Not only that, is like we do this as a team. So it's not even us as individuals. We're sitting there and having communications collectively going, hey, Angie hurt her back. She's coming into class today. We need to come up with a modification. Let's talk about this. So like you had the team. And so if I think one of the most foolish things I see people do is then try to guide themselves back through this injury. And it's like, hey, you may have some experience and that's great. And you may kind of think you know what you're doing, but it's like, there's zero chance that you have the collective ability of an entire team of people with decades of experience. There's just no way you can properly guide yourself back through better than we could.
Right.
And so like people make foolish decisions going, I'm now, or by saying like, I'm going to guide myself through this. I'll make the decision of what workouts I come to or what exercises I'm going to do, or I'm not going to go to the class. I'm just going to do my own thing.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that is just the dumbest thing I've ever heard on the planet. Yeah. It's just like, it kind of blows me away. But I'm like, and I know there's a lot of reasons for it, but I think people need to kind of understand as like, you even with some experience cannot properly guide yourself. One, because there's no way you could have the collective greater experience, but two, you can't just extract yourself from your own emotions. Yeah. And like, that's part of the reason that we need coaching and we need guides. Yeah. It's like, even if you do like have some education and knowledge, like, you are still going to apply your own emotions into making that decisions. And then inherently that's going to be a riskier decision.
Well, it's gonna also set us up for doing the things we want to do and not the things that we need to do.
100%. Yeah.
Need to do this.
Yes.
This is why I went to physical therapy for months. I was like, I need to know, like, when I get past this issue, like, what am I doing? How can I move my body better? I needed somebody else to guide me in like better, more proper movement. And ultimately, like, I needed to check those boxes before I did the surgery. Yeah. And they didn't send me back to physical therapy after surgery. They're like, you don't need to go to PT.
I did it.
Yeah. He goes, our goal is to get people to move. That's why we send them to physical therapy after surgery. Yeah. He is, you've been moving since the second week. You're not going to PT. And it was like, perfect. But yeah, it's like, I think we as a team know when we need guides. Yeah. So why wouldn't, I mean, this has been my profession for so many years. And like, why would I ever think that I don't need a guide? Yeah. That's me getting my own way of my own growth. And that's what we have seen too. Other people getting in their own way of their own growth. Lean into the professionals in the field that have been doing this for a living for a very long time.
Yeah. And I think one of the benefits from having the knowledge and the experience that we do is we can have like quality communication with our guides. And I think sometimes people think like the coaching guide role is like, it can be like, you just tell me what to do. I don't ask any questions about it, but that's not what it has to be. Like, when if you've got an injury, you come to class and you're like, I'm really hesitant to do that. We're not gonna be like, well, too bad. This is what you have to do. Like if you came into class and I'm talking to you, like, okay, Angie, talk to me about this. Like, how you feeling? Like, let's use the back example. Yeah. Like, how you feeling today? You're like, yeah, I can't do the squats. And I'm like, yeah, and deadlifts is out. I'm like, well, what about the floor press? And if you were like, I don't know, like, I think engaging all that's going to not feel great. I'm not going to go like, well, yeah, I think you should do floor press. I might say, well, have we tried it? Do you want to, why don't we try it with the bar and just get in the position and see how it feels? And you'd be like, okay, yeah, that's not bad. And I go, well, why don't we do a light and kind of see how that feels? And you're like, yeah, that's starting to irritate it. We're going to have a communication. Go, okay, well, let's not do that because we don't want to do that. What can we do? Well, like, how does just doing kind of tempo bodyweight squats feel? Like, yeah, I can do that. I can roll. It's this communication pattern. So, this is communication and this collective. We are helping guide you through this, and asking you questions and having a conversation about it. And that's how it should properly go. Now, if you don't have a good base of knowledge, then you may need to kind of trust the coaches in some of this stuff a little bit more. Right. But I would say that, like, the more knowledgeable I am, the more open I am to going and having a conversation with someone. But hey, help guide me through this. and like talking through how to scale or modify or adjust the workout appropriately for whatever thing I'm dealing with.
Yeah. And I think like even as coaches, as we, work through injuries, what that does for us too is like, I can recognize now if somebody's movement pattern is a little bit off, or, because I've dealt with something specific in my lumbar, like I can identify more. And now I have a larger toolbox to pull from. Okay. Does it hurt when you're in extension, or does it hurt when you're in a hinged position? And so helping others understand, like, your coaches are not, we are not injury free. We've gone through multiple injuries. We've gone through multiple, situations where we've tried to get ourselves back into training or stayed in training, whatever. Lean into us.
That's what makes us good guides. I've been down this path before. I can tell you. I can tell you what to expect.
See something going on. I can identify something that's happening, and I'm going to guide you into that proper position.
What allows us to be good guides is the fact is like, I've been injured before.
I've done that,
and I've guided not guided myself, but I've been through it. I've been through down this path, and I've helped others go down this path. So like, you're probably gonna have a better experience if like we do this together versus you doing it solo.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think that's a pretty good summary for injuries and how people can kind of really set their mindset appropriately prior to injury, recognize and have a plan of attack, like when that's going to happen, lean into their guides. And I think that was some great stuff. So Angie, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, David.
All right. NBS Fitness Radio out.
Thank you for listening to NBS Fitness Radio. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends, follow us on social media, and check out our website at www.nbsfitness.net. Hit the subscribe button and tune in next time for more NBS Fitness Radio.